All right. So today I am delighted to welcome Joy to the Sasaga podcast. So yay! For those
Yay!
of you watching the YouTube version of this, she is shaking her hands, all ready to get going. This is going to be a fun episode, I can tell. All right. So Joy, tell us who you are and what you do.
So my name is Joy Jarman-Walsh. I go by JJ Walsh as kind of a condensed version on my YouTube channel and other social media. I'm originally from Hawaii. I went to university in California. I lived in Virginia in the US for a while, but I have lived in Japan for more than half my life now. I have crossed that barrier, and now I'm working as a sustainability consultant. Mostly for sustainable tourism, sustainable travel, but also giving ideas to businesses, how they might be more sustainable in how they do business. It's better for their branding, but also helps them cut costs as well. So I've got a bit of training in sustainable tourism, and I taught business, marketing, and tourism for many years at university before going on it on my own. So yeah.
That is fabulous. I'm so excited to hear about more about the sustainability and more about your background, and especially, first of all, let's start with that word of the year. So I don't know what your word of the year. What is it?
So my word of the year, of course, when I was doing my sustainability masters, sustainable tourism masters, one of the words that they often used was cascading effect. And so for me this year, I really have started almost seeing the connections that are being made and the cascading effects of different parts of community work or environmental activism or innovation or entrepreneurship, and how that is connected to so many other things. That I think cascading is such a great word for me this year. And in my mind, I started actually envisioning when I would talk to different guests on the talk show, I would start envisioning, like when you see a table with all those beautiful glasses of champagne and someone pours champagne in the top and then the champagne cascades down. I actually started visualizing that while I was talking to guests and they were talking about something, and I was making all these connections in my mind to other guests and to other topics. Yeah, so cascading.
I love it. And yes, so connected with my word as well of ripple. So mine is ripple to go, I'm not cascading down like this, I'm going rippling outwards, because it's the same sort of thing. Like when you impact one person, it then starts to impact the people around them as well. So
it's so wonderful. And I'm sure this happens to you, Helen, as well. But sometimes people will contact me and say, I heard about your show through such and such, and I met them randomly, and it has helped me in this other way. And it's not anything that I intended to affect anyone in any way, but it's something that has happened over different connections over time. And it's fantastic. I love those stories.
Yeah. And I'm finding that more and more now, like you having been in Japan for quite a few years, and it can be from years ago, that original connection, and then that starts to have that ripple effect or that cascading effect so much later. I love it.
Fantastic.
So let's get into then the Sasaga success cycle. I would love you to share with us a story from your past of one of the phases that you really struggled with. So a story where you struggled and what you learned from it or how you overcame it. So it can be something related to self-care, phase 1, or phase 2, create your plan, phase 3, communicate your ideas, or phase 4, complete your tasks. So what phase and what's your story?
Yeah, well, I started my own business. I was teaching at university for over 20 years. I thought I would be a university teacher forever, but I started feeling limited in the effect that I could make on my life as well as on others by staying in that situation. So I decided to become an entrepreneur, start my own business. But one of the things I started noticing, well, at first in 2019, it was fine. I was going out a lot. I was meeting people. I was doing training. I was doing tour guide walking tour training, and I was very active, so everything was fine. Once coronavirus hit and I was spending most of my day inside in front of a computer, I had trouble, and I think probably you and a bunch of your listeners can identify with as well. I didn't know how or when to shut off my working time and start my private time, my free time. I would take care of my kids, I would make dinner, and then I'd go back to work and do more projects, because I felt this pressure. Now that I've lost revenue, it was connected to revenue, but it was also connected to, I have to find a way to make a living. Now I can't go outside. Now I can't meet with people in person. And physically, I started suffering. And my dad had just a few months before that, he'd had a heart attack. And I started having really bad pain in my arm. And I had read, you know, when you Google something, when you're feeling pain, I Googled it and it said, you might be having a heart attack. So then I went to the clinic and I got my heart checked. My heart was fine, but still I could barely raise my arm. And so I went through a therapy session. They gave me some training, things that I should do, stretching and everything. But it became very clear to me that I was not taking care of myself physically and mentally and emotionally, was also connected. So then I got over that physical pain, and I made sure that I started prioritizing at least 20 minutes a day. When I got out, I shut everything down on my computer. I got outside for a walk, no matter what kind of weather it was, and started doing these, what do we call it? Mental sanity walks. There's certain hashtag which
Sanity
was trending like during coronavirus. I think it's called a sanity walk, right? So everybody's saying stay home, stay inside and everything, but then of course you feel like you've got to do something, you've got to exercise. So having those 20 minutes a day has really saved me, not only physically but also mentally. And that was a real shock to me, that I could physically be damaging myself by just not separating work and free time enough, you know?
Yeah, it is. I love that you bring this up, and it came up in the Sasuga Cafe just the other day. So every week I do like a weekly questions. The members write their questions in a post, and then I do a Facebook Live into our closed Facebook group answering the questions. And one of the questions that just came up really recently is that one of the participants, she says, she's a member, she says, I find now that with coronavirus, I'm just sitting at my desk at home the whole time. And so I understand what you're saying about the entrepreneur point of view, where it's very much related to your revenue, but even those in the corporate environment, there's just like, there's no boundaries. So you've got to be really firm about creating your own boundaries.
Yeah. Whereas I didn't realize that, right? Like when coronavirus first happened, all these businesses in Japan started saying work at home. I only saw the advantage of that. I was like, oh, this is fantastic for working mothers. We're going to have so much more work-life balance, you know? And then this like physical problem started happening. And I was like, hey, wait a second. Maybe I'm like doing way too much in one position, like one physical position, and it's just not healthy. And I really need to rethink this. And so I have heard, since I kind of came over that myself, I have heard from other women, especially, who are finding it hard to shut off. When do you stop working? When do you stop checking emails? When do you just have some time for yourself? Not just for your kids and for your work, but when do you have your me time when you're supposed to be stay at home? It seems more complicated somehow.
Definitely. So you said that you implemented this 20 minutes a day walk. Was that easy for you to start doing right from the beginning? Or, how did you actually create that habit?
Yeah, I have become, and this is happening over the last 10 years, I have become this crazy kind of early riser who cannot stay up past 9 p.m. That's just like become my cycle. So I cannot sleep past 5 a.m. and I cannot stay up past 9 p.m. for some reason. It's just, and if I mess with that, I'm like really thrown off. But if I stick to that, it seems to work and I'm very productive and I'm happier. If I try to push it, so I try to sleep later or I try to go to bed later, it doesn't work. So I was trying to embrace that, you know, so when I wake up, it's quiet, nobody else is around. I actually was very productive from like 5 a.m. 5 a.m. until 8 a.m. when I'm making bento or breakfast and talking to everybody. And then that was a really good time to head out for a 20-minute walk. And then when everybody's heading out anyway, because it seemed like a natural progression, go out together. And then I would come back and do a few more hours of work. And then before I had lunch, I would go for another 20 minutes.
Oh, brilliant.
And then I'd have lunch. And then I usually, if I didn't go for that extra 20 minutes, I would eat lunch and get really sleepy. And find it really hard to get back to work. And then I also found if I walk too long, like if I have work to do in the afternoon, I cannot walk again longer than 20 minutes. I have to limit myself because if I walk for an hour, like it's a beautiful day, I get carried away, I can do nothing once I get back. I'm just like, I'm too relaxed. So then I just don't get anything done. So finding that balance, maybe just for me, like with my rhythms or whatever, so that 20 minutes in the morning and then 20 minutes before lunch and then have lunch and have a few more hours and then have a few hours, just a free time to read or clean the house or do whatever else I needed to do before the kids came home from school. And I was around to talk to them.
Yeah, I really agree with that idea of having those kind of punctuation marks in your day to build a habit around, like, you know, as you said, as your family's going out the door as well, that's when you can go out the door too. So, and I find that meal times are good for that sort of punctuation. So what I started doing as well in terms of like social media, so a lot of the Sasuga Cafe women, other clients, they ask me about, you know, they feel like they're always checking their social media. And I used to be like that too. But now I have, on the whole, it's not, there are some certain exceptions, but on the whole, no social media before breakfast and no social media after dinner. So having that kind of the meals as a boundary, I find that helps a lot.
Yeah.
What about, so I'd love your perspective, because I think your kids are older now. I know that a lot of listeners have this struggle of young kids, and you know, you think, I'm going to have this routine, this is what I'm going to start doing, and then the kids come along and the routine gets messed up. So what's your advice to those younger kids?
You know, I was having a conference call the other day, and one of the women on the call, she had young kids and they were screaming and running around. And my son is 18. He just graduated this morning from high school. Yay, very excited. My daughter is 14. So I have really, that's like a long distance away from when they were so little and needed me all the time. But I envy that in so many ways now, because those little kids, they need their mom. They want their mom's attention all the time. Whereas now my kids are teenagers and they're so self-reliant. They don't actually need me for much, you know, like I'm around if they need me or need me to make some food, but they're so independent, and that's so wonderful to see. But it's also, I feel the pull back to, I would like to be needed, you know, I would like to have a little person run up to me and need a hug, or, you know, like it's a very different stage of motherhood, right?
It's so funny, as you're talking, I'm actually making a connection, not with just the children, but with colleagues. Because sometimes you can have that as well, where you plan how, you know, in the corporate world, I remember from this as well, you plan how your day is going to be, and then you've got the little person in your office runs up needing something, and everything changes. So it's good to kind of reframe it in a sense of it's not so much the being interrupted, but being needed and how you can be helpful and doing what you can in that moment, and then going back to salvaging your routine as much as you can, just going back on track without making a big fuss of it, right?
Yeah, that's so true. Like when I was university lecturer, and I had my own office in the university, and I would constantly have students coming in asking questions or wanting to hang out. And I often saw in other professors' offices, the students would be there like all the time. And so I would always make a little rule, like, I'm happy to talk to you, but just 5 minutes. Is that okay? You know, and try to put limits on that so I could get back to what I needed to do. Because I loved hanging out with them, but it was real, like it took up a lot of time if you allow that to happen, right?
That is a great tip for those in the corporate environment. When they get interruption like that, you can say, I'm happy to talk to you, but just for 5 minutes. Set the boundaries there. I love that.
Because even with colleagues, sometimes you would have people who didn't have anything to do. You know, they'd finish their job, or they didn't have a deadline coming up, and they'd come to your office just to hang out and have coffee. And I would, say the same thing. I'm really happy to talk to you. Just a quick coffee though, because I've got a bunch of things to do. Is that okay? And still that's polite. You're still giving them time. So it's still very worthwhile. And usually it helps you in a way, because it also distracts you from what you're doing. And for some reason, when that happens to me, I often go back to what I was trying to do a little bit more fresh and a little bit more focused. So sometimes the distraction is good.
Yeah, absolutely. Was it Ernest Hemingway who said that he always, when he was writing, he finished in the middle of a sentence so that he could go back to it with feeling, knowing exactly what he's got to do and feeling more refreshed?
Wow. Well, I'm not a writer, but I have tried to write down, some of my ideas. I've done research papers and stuff, but I've been trying to write more about some of the great ideas that come up in the series. And it's so hard to get your ideas from here down into the paper where somebody can understand really what you're trying to say. Because it's all here. It's all somewhere in here. But the way that I would interpret it and explain it might not be how that reader needs to hear it, So making that writing style transcription of what you're thinking, that's so hard. I have so much respect for writers.
Yeah, it's very tricky because different people have different sort of communication preferences, the way they like to read. So that can, if you're writing a book, it's very hard to suddenly change styles in the middle of the book. So it's a very tricky one. But tell us, this brings us very nicely into your work and all of these live interviews that you are doing. So I don't know how much our listeners know about what you're doing, but they're going to know a lot more in a moment. So tell us about your many, many live interviews.
Yeah. Well, before coronavirus hit, part of my business philosophy was I really wanted to do community building in some way. One of the things that kept coming up was sustainability. Oh, that sounds hard. So one of the things that I tried to do was I did monthly events, which were called Seeking Sustainability. And I wanted it to be fun. I wanted it to be where we would have a short presentation by someone doing something interesting in the community. And then we would have question and answer time. We would have vegan food on reusable plates. We didn't have any plastic waste. We also had like a reuse area where if you had something nice, but you didn't use it anymore, you could bring it and exchange, free exchange. We had a workshop section where we learned how to make our own toothpaste, make our own deodorant, like things which are normally in single-use plastic containers, which is a lot of waste, but maybe we can make it ourselves. So we had a lot of fun at these events. And then coronavirus hit and I was like, what am I gonna, well, we can't do this, but it pushed me online. So I started thinking about what can I do? Well, I have some people who might be interested in talking online, let's try to do it live, because then the people who are watching, they can ask questions, they can make comments, and we are more accountable. And it's more connected to sustainability and transparency. And this is what's really happening. Let's try it live. So I started researching, how could I do it? What kind of software do I need? And then I was ready to launch. The very first one I did, I had 3 guests at one time. At the end of it, I'd been preparing for a week for it. At the end of it, I was exhausted. I had to go in a dark room. I had a horrible migraine for the rest of the day. Like, it was so hard. The hurdle of learning how to get there was really hard. But then slowly, I kept doing them. People would suggest other guests. It got easier, and it became so instructive to my life, and so hopeful in terms of networking with these interesting people all around Japan doing interesting things, who I never would have connected with otherwise. The event I was doing was only in Hiroshima. It was only for people around this area. But pushing myself online, now I have connections with almost 200 people from around Japan who I never would have met otherwise or never heard of. So it's been so inspirational for me and so informative in terms of what's really happening with sustainability. And sustainability is so much more, not just about the environment, not just about reducing waste. It's about, how do we support other people in our community? How do we make our lives more worthwhile? Which includes, how do we perpetuate traditional Japanese culture? How do we support artisans? So it's so wide reaching, and there's so many cascading effects. And it's been such a great journey for me. So when I hear of people enjoying watching it, I'm so pleased and so happy that I can be offering something to other people who listen as well.
Right. And then what about when you have those guests on live, right? And they have to speak, like, are they all very comfortable to talk live?
No. I have had some people who I've talked to, and I said, I would love to have you as a guest on the series. And I send them the playlist so they can see what the other guests have done. And they're like, oh, I actually know some of them, or the topics look really interesting. Oh, you're doing a really good job. And then they say, I don't think I can do that. You know, like it's too daunting to do it live, or it's too daunting to do video. They're happy to just do the audio version, like just a podcast, but not the video version. And I do both. I do the video version, and then that becomes a podcast later. And I was like, yeah, no problem. Let's just put a pin in it, and we'll come back to it in a few months. Or if something comes up and you think, yeah, I could do that later, get in touch. I'm open to it anytime. And I never expected to have done it so many months and so many times. I'm doing it almost every day.
Right, I've seen
it almost a year.
She's doing it every day.
A year. I never expected it. So this coming week, I've got the 200th episode.
That's incredible.
It is incredible. I can't believe it. I'm so grateful. But people just keep saying yes, and my schedule just keeps filling up. And to be honest, I don't have other work coming in right now. You know, everything in tourism is kind of on hold. The kinds of things I was doing before, nothing's happening. So this is a great way to put my enthusiasm towards foundation building, and it's branding for me, and it's building what I want to do into the future. I would never have expected I'd be a talk show host. But why not? Maybe that could be my job, you know?
Well, you do it very well, and we will be linking in the show notes as well, because it was wonderful to be a guest on your show as well. We'll be linking to that. What about when you first started, though? Because you said you went from doing in-person events to being live on camera. So was that something that came very natural to you?
No. And one of the guests the other day, she said, how do you talk for so long? And then I told her, well, I've had some training. Like I have taught at university for over 20 years. Yeah. That's 90-minute lectures. Mm-hmm. You know, that's 90 minutes of mostly me talking the whole time. Mm-hmm. You just kind of get used to it, I think. And I, like you advised as well, when you were on my show, always have some water, because when you're a bit nervous, you need to drink more, keep your voice moist, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, it didn't come naturally at first, even though I was a teacher before. Mm-hmm. I think have you ever, like, I'm sure there's other teachers or other people who are used to making presentations out there. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, whenever I had to speak in front of parents or other teachers, I would get really nervous. Yeah. And I would have trouble speaking. Mm-hmm. And when I first started the talk show, that feeling was there. Yeah. Like, I don't really know who my audience is. I don't know who's watching this. Mm-hmm. So I felt really nervous. Yeah. Like, who is watching this? And I felt like I was overthinking what I was saying. I was overthinking what I sound like, you know? Mm-hmm. And then I have to watch back the episodes to take notes and to help promote it afterwards. Yeah. So I've gotten more used to hearing myself. Yeah. You know, how many years ago I would hear my voice on the answering machine and be like, oh, like, really? Is that what I sound like? You know, you just get a little bit more comfortable with how you sound. And then you get more comfortable in the rhythm of doing a talk show. Mm-hmm. When I first started doing the talk shows, I had pages and pages of notes for every single guest, and I'd never get through them, you know? And then now I have maybe one page of notes, and I'll highlight as we go through. And certain guests are easier than others. Some guests are hard, you know, but the guests who have been hard, in my mind, when I research them, I'd be like, oh, this one's like a home run. I don't need to prep much. Like, this is going to be easy, you know, because they're doing something already that they're talking a lot and they're going to be fine. And when they get on the show, they're like, they don't talk much. And I have to push them more. And I'm like, I didn't prepare properly for this one, you know? But then other people, once I start researching and then you start peeling off the layers of just what's easily available and they start answering and you realize there's so many deeper, amazing connections that you didn't realize. And it's like magic, you know? Yeah. So fun. Talk shows are so fun.
And what I'm taking away from this as well is what often you think is going to be easy can be difficult, and what you think is going to be difficult can be easy. So just go with it. And, you know, as you've been saying, Joy, it's really, and this is a theme that comes up again and again and again on the podcast and what I teach as well, is it's all about repetition. Like, you just keep doing it, and you get better and better and better.
Yeah. And be a good listener.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't sound obvious, but as a talk show host, my most important thing that I'm trying to do is be a good listener. And I'm really trying to listen to what they're saying at the time, not just what I researched, what I want to say, but I'm really listening to what they're saying and I'm trying to build from that. I have my agenda just in case they don't give me much and I have to push it in. But most people, they come up with things and we go a different way and that's totally fine. Yeah. So having that kind of flexibility to just fill an hour with a nice conversation, that frees me up a lot.
Yeah, so true. And again, I'm always drawing parallels to the Sasika podcast listeners, especially, you know, in the business environment and what's can be helpful for you. So when you're in a meeting, right? When you're in a meeting, you go in with your agenda. And at the same time, it's so important to listen to what the others in the room are saying and have that flexibility to to move in the direction that's most appropriate at the time. And that takes courage, right, Joy? Yeah.
I think you have to have the confidence that you will be able to make a nice conversation that's meaningful, no matter which way it goes. That you'll be able to make some connections for the audience, or even for yourself or for the guests, to make it worthwhile. Because you don't want to waste their time. You don't want to waste the audience time, right?
Right. And you may not even have the confidence of that at the beginning, because like, how can you know, because you haven't done it before? And it's about trust as well, just sort of trusting that it'll work out. It'll be fine, and just keep practicing.
Absolutely. And I love it when I'm doing an interview and then someone says, how did you find that? You know? So I really love the research part of it, you know, where I'm digging all online. I'm finding things that they've done in the past and picking a part of that and bringing that up, because it has to connect with my lens of sustainability, how I want to talk about how that promotes society and a better future, and how that could be changed to be better for the environment. Like, I have different connections that I want to make. So there's certain parts of people's research that definitely springs out to me, and they wouldn't have even thought of mentioning it, right?
No. I mean, and I'm speaking from the experience of being a guest on your show, and so for those of you who are listening and you haven't seen this or heard this yet, it's amazing. Like, Joy's like, she goes way into my past. I'm like, and so Helen, you said this in 2016, and what did you mean by? I'm like, what? Like, I'm doing the thing, like I'm looking all nice and calm on the outside, and inside I'm like, oh my goodness, how do I answer that one?
And I appreciate that so much. I appreciate you just going with the flow, because I have had, and it's only a few times has this happened, I have had a few guests being like, what image are you showing?
Yeah.
Because the guests can't see the images, unfortunately. So I have to describe them, but some of the images were maybe from a website or an article they did years ago, right? And some guests would be actually like, how can I see that? What are you showing?
Yeah.
You just have to trust me that you can watch it later and it's fine. I'm not like showing anything bad that you haven't already put out there. Don't worry. You had a great sense of humor. I love that. Thank you, Helen.
You're most welcome. It was a lot of fun. It was good because I like a little bit of a challenge, you know, and that was a challenge. So we'll be linking to that, as I said, in the show notes. So I want to start to close this episode just with a few quick questions. So this is quick questions. And
okay, let's do it.
Quick off the top of your head answer, just a few of those. So a favorite quote. I would like to ask you your favorite quote.
Oh my gosh. I usually keep quotes everywhere.
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh. Now to think of it off the top of my head, I am not good at remembering quotes. Oh my gosh. Torture. Where are my notes?
Favorite bit of advice. It doesn't have to be the quote word for word. Favorite bit of advice.
I think there's so many quotes about flexibility, right? Like, what is it? Don't cry over spilt milk.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds silly, right? Because it's something you say to kids or something.
Yeah.
But for me, it's being able to move on, right? If you make a mistake, forgiving yourself. Like, I don't know if this is particularly for women, but of the many years I spent in Japan, I felt very critical of myself for things that I was doing, especially in a Japanese work environment. And then if somebody on top of that said, oh, that wasn't good, what you did, but I've already beat myself up about that internally. It just like tenfold worse. And then in my mind, it like blows up that it must have been really bad for somebody else to say something. So I think it's so simple, but don't cry over spilt milk is something that sometimes comes up, and it's just like, just let it go. You really just have to let it go. Like nobody else really cares about this. Seriously, Joy, telling myself, nobody else is worried about this at all.
You know, this is a whole other Sasika podcast episode. I can picture it already. So this one's probably coming soon. So much to say on that topic. Okay, so you mentioned milk. Favorite Japanese food or drink?
Oh, I am such a huge fan of wagashi.
Oh,
Japanese sweets.
yeah.
So in the last couple of years, my son and I we've been vegetarian for a long time. We changed to vegan. And so discovering traditional Japanese foods, which are already vegan, it's really challenging because a lot of them have fish or whatever in, but wagashi, the Japanese sweets, which are less sugary than Western sweets, a little bit, I would say, more healthy. I don't know if that's true or not. They're often gluten-free because they're made from rice, right? They have beans inside. I love wagashi, and they're so beautiful. The wagashi are just so artistically perfect, the way they present them and everything. And there's so many different kinds by season. And this is a dying trade that a lot of people aren't learning from masters how to carry on the traditions of wagashi. So we have to support the wagashi makers. So yes, wagashi.
Eat more wagashi. I love that. What a great message. All right. And talking of messages, what advice would you give to yourself 10 or 20 years ago? Pick a time when you were insecure in some way and you needed some advice. What advice would you give to yourself?
Oh, this is maybe not, well, I don't know. I go back and forth in my mind about this, but one of the reasons I ended up leaving the university was because I had kind of sexual harassment issues, power harassment issues, and I had gone through the correct channels to lodge a complaint. Now, it was spurred on because I started worrying about my students. All my students were female. And I started thinking, if this is happening to me, I am not a good role model. I'm not a good teacher. If I don't try to stand up for myself, how can I tell them this is what they need to do, right? So we had this formal structure that we were all encouraged to use if anything did occur. And so I did. And I think that was one of the big reasons I was never promoted. Other people around me were promoted. Nothing ever happened to the people that were formally named, or it was all supposed to be internal. I got apologies. I got baskets of fruit, but nothing changed, So I think I was probably just being very naive. But on the other hand, if I think my taking it for the team there might have helped other women coming after me, or even other men at the institution who had similar power harassment or gender harassment or whatever, if it made it a little bit easier for them because what I had done, then in that way, it's worth it. I don't know. If that didn't happen, I would probably still be there. So on that slant as well, maybe I'm better off because I'm in this whole new part of my life that I never would have gone into, right?
Yeah.
So it's good, but I don't know what I would say, Helen. Would I tell myself to do it or not? I'm not sure.
Well, you could say do it and it's going to work out.
Well, that's true. Yeah, do it, but don't beat yourself up about it because it's going to be okay.
It's going to work out. Yeah. And that just happens so often, people going through really tough times. And then when you got through it, you find, oh, wow, if I hadn't have gone through that really tough time, I wouldn't be where I am now.
Yes.
No, it's tough at the time.
Yeah, that is exactly true. Like what kind of person would I be now if I didn't go through that? I would be a different person. I would be at a very different stage. And I'm glad I am where I am. It wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. And yeah, that's tough. But I like your advice. Do it and don't worry about it. It's the right thing to do.
Do it. It's going to work out anyway. Yeah, I'm going to have to stop myself now because I'm going into, this could be another whole episode.
Yeah.
I want to respect your time and the listeners' time as well. Make sure that we don't go on for like hours and hours. Is there anything else, Joy, that you would like to share with the Sasika podcast listeners today?
I would like to just encourage everyone, and one of the things that I've been, it's been coming up in social media recently is people talking about struggles. And I know this is such a hard time during coronavirus. And I think just knowing that you are not alone, that there are people not only around Japan, but there are people around the world who are struggling with this. Like, what am I going to do next? How am I going to make an income? Like, what is this new reality? Like, how do I function? I think there's so many hard questions that a lot of us have right now. And I think just that feeling and understanding that you are not alone, hopefully that gives you a little bit more peace of mind. I
love that. I think that's such a great message. You're not alone. And when you start to actually talk with other people, you come together in a community, which, you know, Joy, you're all about creating the communities. And that's when you find that there are possibilities. And then that's when you get the cascade effect.
Yes.
Love it.
And have champagne and celebrate your cascade effect.
Yes. Oh, no, on that note, what better note to end this episode?
Cheers.
Yeah, the champagne. Thank you so much, Joy. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you on the Sasika podcast.
Thank you so much, Helen. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, more of your lives. Wonderful stuff. We'll be linking to that in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks, Helen.
Bye.
Bye.